We've got the oak hammock, and it's spectacular. We've got the pine flatwoods, and it's spectacular. If you just take those plants and put them in the neighborhood, you're done. That's all you got to do.
Everybody wants to go to the national park.
Yeah.
So why not just make the local community a national park? Why not make your home a national park?
There's got to be a version of landscaping that isn't just mowing grass. We've got to be able to do something with this land that is more functional, is more ecologically diverse, and is just better. Because we're going to spend all this energy on it, like, we've got to be able to do better than farming grass at an industrial scale. If that's the case, right, if the whole purpose of these lawns is recreational space, how much crazier is it to cover those things in poison? If that's the only part of your landscape that you even anticipate interacting with, and it's also the part of your landscape that you're covering in poison, that feels like a pretty wild contradiction in goals. This also is a situation where we have a very, very, very profitable industry that has built itself around growing very predictable plants. If you come along and suggest that that should change, I think you're understandably going to get pushback on that. I just think that there is the risk of change, and there is potentially a much more enormous risk of not changing.
Welcome to the Ground Up Podcast, conversations about building biodiversity, resilience, and sustainability from the ground up.
Greg, thanks for joining me on the Ground Up.
Thanks for having me. It's a real honor. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, this will be fun. So really want to get into your background and your journey because you've been boots on the ground at Sunbridge and Wesleyan Park for the past couple years, working with these teams that are implementing the sustainable landscapes for the builders, working with the residents, maintaining and managing these native dominant landscapes. So lots to get in there. But tell me a little bit about your journey, how you got into this kind of work.
Well, the really long story is I grew up on a farm, fourth generation land in eastern North Carolina, surrounded by natural forest, only child, only kid in the neighborhood, which is just the family. And so I spent a ton of time just kind of wandering around in the woods. When I moved away from home, I lived in downtowns because I wanted to be in the opposite of the way that I had grown up. So I moved to the city. And in the city, I could walk to everything. I was like 25 before I had ever lived in the suburbs. And so when I moved to the suburbs, I was just kind of immediately horrified because having grown up in the country, I had seen kind of open space and agricultural land, really functional, productive systems and, ecologically robust systems that were in conservation land. And then I had lived in, like a really human dominated landscape where you had all these conveniences and dynamic cultural experiences and everything. And when we moved out to the suburb, my roommates and I was like, dude, there's nothing out here. I mean, you can't really walk to anything. You can't really do anything with like the quarter acre that you have. It's just kind of grass. And so I got really obsessed with how we had selected that as the use case for so much land in the United States. And had been entrepreneurial kind of all my life, was looking to start another business and decided to start a landscaping company and thought there's got to be a version of landscaping that isn't just mowing grass. We've got to be able to do something with this land that is more functional, is more ecologically diverse, and is just better. Because we're going to spend all this energy on it, like we've got to be able to do better than farming grass at an industrial scale.
Yeah. So you came to that realization just as someone living in Florida on a quarter acre suburban lot.
Yeah. Well, that was in North Carolina. I came down here because there's a 9-month growing season. So if you're gonna get into this industry, this is the state to do it in. And we had family down here, and so my then girlfriend, now wife, and I moved down here. And
is that really the reason you moved to Florida?
It's a huge motivator, yeah.
To have a year-round landscaping business.
I'd say it was at least 75 to 80% of it. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Was that this was where going to be. When I first got into all of this, it was through the permaculture perspective, and so that whole scene has a lot of emphasis on growing food and on fruit. And in North Carolina, there were some opportunities for that, but not nearly what you could get away with down here. And we'd spent a lot of time down here, and I thought, this is it. We could really do cool stuff. There were also organizations down here that were already kind of doing that kind of thing. And in fact, the beginning of my career here was working for one such organization. It's a 501c3 that's still active called Ideas for Us, and the program that I worked in was called Fleet Farming. And we would convert front lawns in Audubon Park in downtown Orlando into farms, productive farms. And then the program that I helped develop there was to kind of expand our reach to other neighborhoods and do little mini food forests and raised garden beds and stuff. And so what quickly became apparent is that the demand and the opportunity were vastly larger than what a nonprofit really was even interested in addressing. And that's when I started Connected Landscapes, which is around the time that I think you and I met originally.
Yeah, Connected Landscapes. It's a great name for ecological landscape company. So I really connected with that.
Oh.
But that was great when I did meet you. I think it was at the OUTSIDE Collab.
Yes.
Maybe 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And to see somebody in town who was entrepreneurial, launching and building a sustainable landscaping business was really cool. I was very excited to meet you at the time. And so how did that go? What was your experience starting up a company?
Well, I mean, you know, there's the challenges of starting any business. It's just immensely stressful, and it's a lot of complication, as you know. But in terms of the way that we were positioned, we started up during COVID, which initially I was pretty panicked because I thought, well, there goes really any opportunity to start a business. But it was kind of a blessing in disguise because everybody was home and everybody was working on their yards and everybody was thinking kind of along the same lines that I had been thinking. They were like, what are we doing with all this space? And so we got this really, really cool influx of people who were exactly the people I wanted to find, that had these small pieces of land that they felt weren't productive, that weren't supporting any kind of ecology, and they wanted to change that. And so in just a really, really short amount of time, we were able to scale, commercially pretty successfully. But because I'm insane and cannot be satisfied with anything ever, it really quickly got to a place where I felt like the impact that we were having was not the impact that I wanted to have, and really, to say it plainly, I just didn't care about people's backyards. We would spend like weeks and weeks and weeks on these jobs between the design and the installation. And then other than maybe doing some seasonal maintenance, you'd never see them again.
The clients?
No, the spaces. We'd have repeat business from time to time, but a lot of these, it was just all right, well, okay, there was that. There was those 2 months of my life, that of making this place look beautiful and cool. And I hope that it works out. And I just kept thinking, what I wanted to do was realign the way that people relate to outdoor spaces. I mean, the name Connected Landscapes, like you mentioned, was about was multifaceted, but the main connection that I was interested in was the connection that people have with the land that they interact with. And I thought, if we could be doing that in places that a lot of people experience, not only was that going to be more personally satisfying, but I thought it was also kind of the scope of the problem.
So you were trying to orient your business away from the residential design towards more public spaces, or?
Yeah, at least things that felt like they were going to impact more acreage at the bare minimum, just projects that were not just a discrete landscape, right? Mm-hmm. Or, even if it had, I don't know, it was one of those things where I kind of got to a place where I just felt like I was spinning my wheels. And it was like, okay, well, we could keep doing what we're doing. And there's a business there, and it's, pretty good. But it's not really, I don't think, the scope of the issue. And around that time, I think I went to my first OUTSIDE conference, and I saw what you guys were talking about at OUTSIDE and thought, okay, that's what I'm talking about. How do you start to address these issues at the HOA level, at the municipal level, at the county level, at the watershed level? Because that's what we have to be able to do. And obviously that's exciting from a commercial perspective as an entrepreneur, but I also thought, okay, if you're not attempting to get to that scale ecologically, it's cool. It's cool to put a butterfly garden in somebody's property. It's valuable. You will probably create a relationship between them and their children and these other organisms. People will be able to grow some food for themselves. but we're not really going to move the needle until we have started to get involved at the development level, particularly here in Florida. And when I first came down here, I think like most people didn't really understand how all of that worked. And the more that I started to understand it, it was like, no, that's the opportunities. We have to be able to get in at the development level and reimagine these things to begin with, instead of trying to retrofit things that are already broken. Like let's build them right to start with.
From the ground up.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's why we call this the ground up, is that there's an opportunity to get all of the elements in place right on the ground floor.
Yeah.
It requires reimagining in order to rewild. You have to really think about, okay, what tools do we have at our disposal to create ecological systems and sustainable landscapes. We have the native plants, we have the soil amendments, we have the design expertise, the knowledge. It's all there, but it is difficult to retrofit a landscape that was designed along these conventional landscape lines, because there's so much broken with that system, so much wrong with it in the first place, that it is easier to start from the ground up. Although there's going to be the opportunity to restore and retrofit, but in terms of scaling something up, like you're saying, to get enough momentum in the direction of this new paradigm, and to shift the industry, to shift enough minds to where you get to enough momentum where you can grow a new industry, not for just one business, but for hundreds of businesses. And I think you're right about looking for the opportunity to impact things at scale. As much as the residential yard is important, because that's a basic unit. That's the one place where everybody can connect themselves and their family to the environment.
Yeah.
But when you're doing one residence, every 2-3 miles, those landscapes are disconnected.
Yes. Yeah.
And
it's like the thing that used to happen is we'd plant so when you're doing a landscape design, you're starting, or at least I do, I tend to start with the largest elements in the design. So that's going to be your canopy trees, right? And I'd be in a suburban lot and think, they don't really have many shade trees, so we'll do a live oak here, a magnolia or whatever. And then in the adjoining yards, it's like, Royal Poinciana and camphor trees. So it's like invasive trees. And so you're going, okay, great. Like I'm going to plant an oak in an island of an invasive canopy. And that's where you see that you have to have a better answer than one lot at a time. It can't just be a thing where the people who know, and everybody else is on their own.
Yeah, that's right. And that's kind of creating these wildlife corridors, these ecological corridors, so that the pollinators and the animals and the birds, they can all flow through these connected landscapes, because they don't recognize property lines, they don't recognize jurisdictional lines. They need to be able to travel freely within their natural range and habitat to move. Of course, some birds and pollinators migrate across continents, but others are just trying to exist in this region, and they need to be able to forage, to find habitat, to find food. And one lot is important. In fact, one lot can be incredibly powerful, but it's by creating landscapes that are all connected in a chain, in a regionally significant way, that we can really make an impact on biodiversity. And so working with the large developers makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
And we're really excited and fortunate to have the opportunities that we have currently. And also with utilities like the roadways, we're looking at partnering with the Central Florida Expressway Authority.
Oh, cool.
Dix Height is going to be doing some trials with them to explore how they can manage their roadside landscapes in a more ecologically sustainable way, but also in a way that helps to reduce some of their operating costs.
Yeah.
So a lot of mowing and things like that. So that's a huge opportunity, because the roadway corridors represent a huge area of landscape opportunity, and they kind of connect everything.
Yeah, like it's already a built-in corridor. It's literally a corridor.
It's literally a corridor. So you can start to imagine, okay, we have Sunbridge, 29,000 acres of residential and community landscapes that are developed with this plant palette that is reflective of what you're going to find in the split oak forest and the other conserved areas nearby. You have the Central Florida Expressway roadsides that now can be contributing to these ecological corridors, and on and on. I think the solar farms and more opportunities, I think, are just around the corner.
I don't see how they couldn't be. I mean, so I've been doing this for roughly 10 years, right? And for that entire time, the kind of watchword has been, it's coming. Like, the native thing is coming. The native thing is coming. And what I've compared it to, particularly, and also the food thing, I mean, although we could go down that rabbit hole, but I think the food thing and the native thing are decoupling, and I think they're a little different. But the whole time that I've been in this industry, the watchword has been there's going to be paradigmatic changes to the way that the landscape industry works. And what I've always compared it to is if you were working in like personal computing in like the 70s or the 80s, where the guys at like IBM or the guys that are in like the Silicon Prairie are like, this is going to change everything. This is going to change everything. And people are going, what do you need a computer for? And then it's like literally 20 years later, it's like, they were right. And I think we're in the stage right now. What I used to say is what the watershed moment was when they made the computer pink. You know what I mean? Steve Jobs made them cool looking. And then everybody was like, oh, okay, now that they're not ugly beige boxes, now I'm on board. And I was like, we are somebody making it cool looking. Whatever that moment is in the landscaping industry, we're rapidly approaching that tipping point. And it could be Sunbridge. I mean, it really might be literally a single example at scale of native landscaping. Because the other experience that I've had this entire time is until people see this with their own eyes, it's almost impossible to convince them that it's a good idea.
Oh, you can't describe it. You have to immerse people in a beautiful functional landscape with the pollinators, with the blooms, with the breeze, with the fragrances that are coming off of the Simpson stoppers and the Sweet Bay magnolias. And it's a whole immersive experience. And you're like, oh, this feels kind of nice. It feels safe. It feels, like I could live here, and it's tidy and it's clean and it has color and all of these things that, people take in instantly.
Yeah.
That moment is much more powerful than you and I sitting on this podcast describing
waxing prosaically
why a native landscape is obviously the hottest thing since the iPod or the iPhone. And that's the beauty of Sunbridge, is that we're going to have an opportunity to show this at scale. We're going to impact a lot of residents. There's already hundreds of people living there. And and it's a journey to to implement this and execute it correctly. But we're on that path, and you've been, like I said, literally on the ground working with the community. So that's exciting.
It is really exciting, and I mean, I mean, obviously you and I have talked about this quite a lot, but Sunbridge is interesting because I was thinking about this the other day about like. It's really easy to kind of get lost in the challenges and think like, boy, there's been a lot of frustrations. There's been, I deal with customers who are very much not on board. And I have to kind of talk to those people and sort of explain why it's happening the way that it's happening. But I had this thought, and I'm curious to hear your feedback on it. I thought, well, being a pioneer and being a perfectionist are mutually exclusive goals. If you know that you're doing something that's going to require vision and that it's virtually unique, if not actually unique, you really have to select for moving forward and not perfection.
Or the great is the enemy of the good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And we have to start with what we know and what we can accomplish and iterate and go forwards from there. And I think that being transparent about that was really important to gaining the trust of Tavistock and the development team over there, because I remember 3 years ago walking with Clint and Richard Levy in the model home park at Westland and telling them, look, this isn't working so good. We've obviously used the wrong plant here, but we have a solution. We're going to come in, we're going to fix it.
Yeah.
And now we've learned something really important, and that's going to be the journey. We're going to have to learn by failing and iterate. But if we're quick to respond and we utilize this opportunity to start building the expertise and demonstrate what does work, we can get it right. And we did. I think that the first year was the most challenging, but now we're really starting to get into a groove where we know specifically which plants are performing. Mm-hmm. We've gotten really good insights into how to leverage those plants to create designs that are cohesive across the whole neighborhood, create that nice linear streetscape down the front yards along the public realm of the community. And but yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what's working, what's not working in terms of the plant selections and the design out there.
So yeah, I mean, I think we kind of, as an industry, when I say we, just like landscapers in Florida in general, had a pretty good sense of the native woodies, like the Yopon shillings and the Miss Schillers and stuff. Those are less exotic, maybe examples of things that, despite the fact that they're basically bulletproof, like are weirdly kind of underutilized. It was not surprising to me to see that those things are very, very consistent and very, very, successful in the neighborhood that we're working in. The thing I think that's unique about native landscaping, particularly in contrast to like the Florida palette, the like standard Florida, the Schefflera, Croton, VO thing, is we have to rely for color on wildflower species. And that is a wildly different design kind of approach than other landscapes have. So I think our biggest achievement has been finding ways to use perennial wildflowers to really bring the like wow factor into those designs beyond just kind of the woody stuff. Like the woody stuff was easy, right? Like we had to kind of find those species. Getting the color in is the challenge, because the number one request when you talk to people is, well, I want color. Okay, well, we can't do crotons, we can't do cordyline, we can't do, all of these like kind of the
Loropetalums, trinets.
Yeah, like you don't have any of that. And so because we've been denied those kind of easy, exotic, woody species, we had to find a way to make it work with these native flowers, which are much more delicate, like physically delicate. I mean, they're, pretty resilient in terms of plants, but you can't just like throw them around. You really kind of have to be intentional about the way that you're putting them in the landscape, or otherwise they disappear. This spring, after having spent like the last year planting like literally thousands of these flowers, this spring when we started to really get that flush from the lanceleaf coreopsis, from the blanket flower, from the Stokes aster, from the native star rosin flower, from the many flower beard tongue, from the porterweed, when you've got all that color, it's undeniable. It's just this riot of color. And what you said this years ago, I don't know if it was an outside or if we were just in a meeting or whatever, but the thing that people forget is Florida literally means land of flowers. And I think that you have to think about that as a landscape designer when you're working in these spaces, that the easy kind of big green glossy foliage thing is popular. I understand why it's popular, understand that's why what people want, but I think what we have to do to get the landscapes to work is lean into that land of flowers. There have to be blossoms. From a design perspective, let alone the ecological value, let alone the reduction in fertilizer, let alone the reduction in irrigation. I think it rises and falls on those perennial wildflowers.
Those wildflowers are gorgeous. Right now, the coreopsis is,
oh my God,
is just putting on a show. It's taken over, the landscape right now because it's so visible. You could see it from 100 yards away. You could see it driving down the street. It draws your attention. It's vibrant yellow. Same thing can be said about the native star rosin flower, and that's blooming year round.
Yeah, year round. And it's funny. We just redid a townhouse, and we did it with a lot of these native perennials. And we had taken out a lot of, the stuff that was in this particular townhouse was, there had been some issues with it. A lot of it was unhealthy, so it wasn't a great example of any landscape. But when we replaced it, because those wildflowers initially are quite small, I had a guy go, so what, you guys are just going to put in a bunch of annuals and change them every year? And I went, no, like these will stay here. This is it. And so I think a big piece of it is that for years we've kind of shied people away from blooms because people think of blooms as high maintenance. You think of an annual bed. around the entrance to a neighborhood is like the highest intensity maintenance probably, period. You're constantly changing it out. You almost immediately get like powdery mildew issues. You almost immediately have to refertilize, and so on and so forth. These native flowers are different. It's not doing an annual bed. It can be, you know what I mean? If you wanted to manage it like an annual bed, you could, but you don't have to.
Absolutely not. I mean, annuals are being replaced 4 times a year in most communities.
Yeah.
And that's a little hidden cost or secret most people don't realize. It looks great. You're driving up, there's the entranceway, there are the annuals. But literally 4 times a year, you got to go and buy new plants. You got to come back in there. You got to tear everything out, plant everything back, add some new mulch, not to mention the fertilizer and pesticide program that goes with it. But the native flower, or the native star rosin flower, it looks pretty much like an annual, except it lasts year round. And the same can be said about the Stokes aster, which gives you a purple flower. The blanket flower or gaillardia, that looks great year round. Coreopsis is going to be more spring and summer, but man, what a show.
And crucially, even when it's not blooming, you still have that rosette. You know, so it's at least green. And one of the things, I mean, I always bring this up in meetings. I feel like there's often a pressure on native plants to be better than existing, like, universally adopted species. And so I always put up like that. So yeah, you get your main value from your landsleaf coreopsis in the spring and the summer. And then it is just a little green thing. But that's just liriope, right? Like, liriope is the most ubiquitous plant in the industry, and all it is just kind of a little low-growing green thing for like 9/10 of the year, or 11/12 of the year.
And it blooms, but let's be honest, it's not exactly
No.
like
Nobody thinks of
showy
liriope
bloom.
as color, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, yeah.
Well, that's the thing too. I call time out on that, because they say, you know, where's the color in these native landscapes? And like, I could show you the color in the native landscapes, but why don't you show me the color in your conventional landscapes? Because I'm not seeing it.
Yeah.
I'm seeing green.
And there's 2 cordyline by the door, like, or a croton under a window. So it's like, I'm not so convinced that it's these worlds apart that it's often portrayed to be. And I think there's a lot of reasons why maybe. I think people are really, really reticent to change, just in general. And this also is a situation where we have a very, very, very profitable industry that has built itself around growing very predictable plants. If you come along and suggest that that should change, I think you're understandably going to get pushback on that. I just think that there is the risk of change, and there is potentially a much more enormous risk of not changing. Because the things that seem foolproof right now are not going to last. Like, what if you have an issue with these things that we've introduced in these environments, which we've seen in Florida over and over and over and over again, that if you over-select for an exotic species that isn't ecologically adapted to the environment that it's in, and something happens to it, it's often quite catastrophic. And I think saying it's not well, I mean, it's the Cherrylake motto, right? If it's not broken, don't fix it, right? Like, that's not our motto. We break it and make it better. I think you have to do that, and I think now's the time to do it, because we're only going to, barring some kind of wildly unforeseen circumstances, more people are going to move here, more people are going to build houses, we're going to continue developing land, we're going to have a better solution for it.
Oh, absolutely. There's the risk, there's the reward. It requires, you know, an organization like the OUTSIDE Collab to really think about how we can change the landscape and talk about the need to change. You talk about the cordyline and the croton, which people like to put up front for color. Those plants come from Costa Rica and Colombia, where you're getting 134 inches of rain a year, and it rains every single day.
Yeah.
So naturally, when you come to Florida, we do get 52 inches of rain a year, but we get like 12 inches at a time. Basically, it rains 4 days and the rest of the year.
Yeah.
You know, we get this very long drought. Right now, we're in a drought. So those plants simply cannot survive on rainfall alone. They require constant irrigation. And that's fine if you have the water to spare. But we know that in Florida, we're running out of groundwater resources, especially in Central Florida. But in other parts of the state, because of saltwater intrusion, you've got issues that with water use that are equally severe. Not to mention all of the water quality issues. So the need to change is apparent. And I think that generally there's rising awareness and consciousness at all levels in the state of Florida, amongst policymakers, amongst designers, developers, home builders even, and the general public, that we can do better. And the place to start is our landscapes.
Yeah.
There's an unnecessarily huge proportion of our natural resources that are being utilized by our landscapes, and that's not sustainable.
No, it isn't. I mean, particularly in Florida, right? Which we were just talking about a minute ago. The uniqueness of the ecology in Florida. Anywhere this would be an issue, but here, where we have these globally unique, incredibly fragile, incredibly unique and remarkable ecosystems, to not try to account for that. Like, it's the whole reason that the state, like when the Spanish got here, they thought the Fountain of Youth was here because it was so magical. You know, imagine landing on a place and immediately assuming it's magical. You know what I mean? Why would you not do everything in your power to protect that?
Yeah. And we have such an abundance of native plants.
Yeah.
Over 3,000 species. You're bound to find 99 native plants that are going to be rock stars for your ornamental landscapes.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at. We pretty much have those plants more or less identified. We keep on introducing, new plants, and but we've got enough to do this at scale, and the impacts are huge. We actually did a comparison of the input utilization on the homes at Sunbridge Wesleyan Park compared to the homes across the street, which is a Pulte Del Webb community, which is basically the standard Florida conventional landscape. And we are getting meter readings from the Toho Water Authority, so we have very good data on water use now for over 2 years, and it's staggering. The difference is a 75% reduction on the Wesleyan Park landscapes. So that's 60 inches a year on the conventional landscape, and we're coming in around 15 to 20 inches on the alternative, and that's just water.
Yeah, right. That's just water.
75% reduction. Yeah, one home. It's doesn't sound like a lot, but you talk about the 29,000 homes at Sunbridge, you get into some really big numbers.
But even at one home, you're still talking about, I think, tens of thousands of gallons, right? I mean, it's a significant amount, and yeah, that at scale, it's like apocalyptic. It's
You're saving over 200 gallons a day.
Yeah, which is
365
crazy.
days a year.
Like, I always think about gallon jugs. I don't know, for whatever reason, that's like the image that I think of as like a milk jug. And you think about 200 gallons of milk is an enormous amount of water.
Every day.
Yeah.
And
for nothing. I mean, for green, I guess, right? But like, come on. There's so much ground to be gained. The most exciting thing about this is the data that comes out of it, I think. Every year at the OUTSIDE conference, it's like, whoa, like, I mean, when you start talking about that, hundreds of thousands of gallons and hundreds of thousands of gallons of pesticides, and it's like, yeah, that's the piece of this that really gets exciting, because it feels like to me the piece that moves the needle. It's the thing that gets people really genuinely excited. Like, I mean, for me, it's all these high-minded aesthetic ideals about like what neighborhoods should look like. But when you break it down into data, I think you get the engineer-minded people who are looking at the way that we're building this stuff and who know, to your point, that it's not sustainable. You show them the data and it's undeniable.
That's right. And OUTSIDE Collab is really focused on doing the research, collecting the data, and measuring objectively the outcomes. We don't want to focus on process, we want to focus on outcomes.
Yeah.
And the goals were set early on to be eliminate or reduce irrigation water past establishment, eliminate or reduce mineralized fertilizers, eliminate or reduce pesticides, and maximize ecosystem services. So those are the big 4 goals that we set for ourselves. So just mentioning the water, we know now that we can save 75% of the water.
Unreal.
That's big. When you scale it out, I actually did the math. So one home, you're saving 275 gallons a day, but over the course of a year on the planned 29,000 units at Sunbridge, that would be 8 million gallons a day or 3 billion gallons a year. And you're like, okay, well, what is 3 billion gallons a year? That's 4,500 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water a year. Think about one Olympic-sized swimming pool.
It's, yeah.
Now
I mean,
think about 4,500.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's unfathomable. Like, you can't even really. That's got to be approaching like named bodies of water.
Yeah, it's huge.
Like,
And
what's Lake Apopka? I mean, you're talking about a lot of water. It's,
Yeah,
you know,
it's a lot of water.
3 billion gallons of water. My God.
so tell me about the fertilizer, because you've been actually managing the maintenance crews out there. So, tell me how much fertilizer you put on those landscapes.
Not a drop. I think prior to me coming on board, I think we had experimented with some of the natives to see, like, okay, if you fertilize them a little bit, if you do a real light chicken feed, like, how does it look? Frankly, what we've observed, and I mean, this has been my experience at Connected Landscapes as well, is they actively dislike the fertilizer. So not only do you not need it, like, you're often creating problems for yourself by fertilizing. We are using command compost as a amendment when we're initially planting, and then if we have issues, which we frankly seldom do, but if we do, a little top dress of that compost, I mean, you get a visible green up on turf. We top dressed all the turf in the neighborhood last spring, and it was within 2 weeks, it was like golf course green, and it was just compost. It was I think like less than an inch. It was a minuscule amount of compost.
Half an inch per 1,000 square feet, I think, is what we're doing for top dressing. So compost is 100% organic. It's OMRI certified, and it has no synthetic or mineralized fertilizers. It's
made from a waste product. Like, it's circular. And it's all we need.
okay. So 2 years we've managed the landscapes at Wesleyan Park, and in fact over 3 years here at Cherrylake on our pavilion and edge gardens, 0 mineralized fertilizers.
Yeah.
So 100% reduction.
Yeah, 100% reduction.
So what insecticides or fungicides are you having to use to control pests in these native landscapes?
Not a one. We really aren't seeing issues. I mean, I literally just actually had somebody walk me through. They had a Eagleston holly that had a little bit of mealybug on it, which is actually kind of interesting. I don't know that I'd ever seen that on an Eagleston holly. But it was like a couple of the underlying branches. It looked to me like it was maybe getting hit with some irrigation, so there's maybe a little bit of extra humidity there. And I said, okay, let's look at the overall health of the tree. The tree's healthy. You've got a little bit of a pest issue on this bottom branch. This isn't going to impact your livelihood, right? Like, your house isn't going to burn down. I get this is a little unsightly. Let's wait, because I'll be here every week. I mean, we're managing the maintenance, right? I'm going to keep an eye on it. Let's look over the next couple of weeks. And I bet what we're going to see within those next couple of weeks is a bunch of stuff show up and start eating these things.
What kind of pest was it?
Mealybug.
What happened?
Well, I mean, we'll see.
Oh, you're waiting.
Yeah, but I bet nothing. And the example that I used to use for years was when we first moved in the house that my wife and I bought in the Milk District in College Park. We had this hibiscus, like, that whoever had lived there had planted like directly in front of the sidewalk. It was terrible placement. It was like one of the worst placements of a plant I'd ever seen. And my wife loved it. She was like, it's colorful. And I started noticing it had really, really bad aphids on it. And I was like, okay, here we go. Like, I was like, I'm going to let these aphids eat this thing to the ground. She's like, it looks like it's got bugs on it. I was like, yeah, I don't think, I'm not really sure what we can do about it. She's like, aren't you a gardener? I'm like, yeah. And I'm going, okay, they're going to kill this thing off for me. It's going to be great. And I can blame it on them. And these aphids completely defoliated that hibiscus to the ground. And then literally almost immediately, a bunch of ladybugs showed up, ate it all the aphids off, and the thing came back, and it was the healthiest hibiscus I'd ever seen in my entire life. I was like, well, there you go. I mean, it's you take a step back, you let the kind of system happen, and you watch what happens. The worst thing that we've seen in Sunbridge has been a little bit of mealybug on the muley grass. Mm-hmm. It goes away. It just disappears.
Well, you're going to cut that plant back once a year anyways, because that's how you manage muley grass. And so by just waiting, letting the beneficial insects come in, like the ladybugs, and then take care of the pest, or you can prune it out. There's been no utilization of insecticides or fungicides whatsoever.
Well, if we want to be perfectly transparent, the only thing that's getting any kind of a treatment is St. Augustine and the Verges, which has been a point of contention that the St. Augustine is even there for the entire time. So the only hole in all of this isn't the native plants, it's the St. Augustine that we're trying to get rid of. It's the only input that we have to continuously maintain.
Right. St. Augustine, you require 4 times a year treatment with imidacloprid and bifenthrin and clethodim. And there's a list, as long as your arm of chemicals that you can't even pronounce that have to be utilized to maintain St. Augustine in Florida. But Tavistock has chosen to eliminate the use of St. Augustine going forwards in the next neighborhoods.
And frankly, that just got rolled out that the St. Augustine's going away in the next neighborhoods. But prior to that, I had the builders coming to me and saying, why don't we just do this peanut thing in these things? It looks great. It looks like you don't have to do anything to it.
The builders were saying that?
The builders, yeah. A couple of the builders had asked me, they were like, aren't you guys all about this peanut stuff? Why don't we just put that out there? And I was like, look, man, I'm all about it. Like, let's do it.
The perennial peanut looks amazing where we did the test plots.
Yeah.
And when we started the neighborhood, they were doing St. Augustine in the Parkway area, which is between the sidewalk and the curb. So in front of every house, you had St. Augustine. And we asked Tavistock, and they got the Toho Water Authority involved in funding a few test plots where we said, let's just take 10 homes and take out the St. Augustine and plant perennial peanut. We did sunshine mimosa and some, we did mixes and others. And so that grew in the model home park. And so that's what the builders are seeing. And you're saying that they're coming to you asking, why aren't we doing this everywhere?
Yeah. Yeah, the St. Augustine sticks out like a sore thumb. I mean, because it doesn't fit into the whole concept. It's a gap in it. And I think everybody sort of organically identified that and went, well, this seems like it does great. Why don't we just do that?
Yeah, it's a great plant. Don't have to mow it.
Yeah.
You don't have to water it. You're not going to have any pest issues. Heck, it fertilizes the other plants.
It's a nitrophile, yeah.
Fixes nitrogen.
And I should point out, we were talking about pests. I was talking about the ones that we've seen. The reality is you really just don't see them at all. I mean, it's not like these are bug-infested landscapes. Do you know what I mean? I think sometimes that's one of the points of anxiety that people have about this stuff is that you say, well, it's ecologically active and you're going to get all these cool, bugs and stuff. And people go, I don't want a bunch of bugs. It's not like you're surrounded by noxious pests or whatever. Like, you occasionally see a couple of leaves get nibbled on, but most of these things, we were talking about this earlier, have defenses that they've already evolved.
They're in balance with the insect populations that have evolved in Florida.
Because of course they are. When you walk out in the woods, it's not like you see like massive defoliation of plants and stuff because there's a balance that exists.
Of course. Well, you're more likely to see a butterfly.
Yeah.
And
a dragonfly, yeah.
Yeah, and when you go back to color, people say, well, we want color in the landscape, and yes, we agree. There's great plants for colors. We talked about them. When the butterflies show up, it's like a flying flower. You have this beautiful butterfly with large wings and all these cool patterns, and there's yellow butterflies and orange butterflies and white butterflies and fluorescent yellow butterflies, and and they start coming to the landscape. The black ones are really cool too, and that to me adds a layer of interest, of magic to the landscape that you'll never get out of a conventional Florida landscape that's dominated with exotic plants from Colombia and Costa Rica, and Africa, China, because the butterflies that pollinate those plants didn't come over.
Yeah, they're not here.
They're still over in China and Africa and Colombia and Costa Rica. They don't live here.
It is funny. You say that. We were in Thailand, and it was the first. I guess that's where bougainvillea is from. It must be because it's everywhere, and it was. I've always hated bougainvillea, not only to maintain it, but I'm not even a big fan of the way that it looks. But I was like, okay. All right, okay, here it is. Like, this is where it's supposed to be. It's doing great. You've got your viburnums over here. They look great. This is where they're supposed to be. Look how great they are. And then you come back here and you go, this isn't where these guys are supposed. They're supposed to be in the rainforest.
Yeah.
And Central Florida's not a rainforest.
It's not. And we talk about right plant, right place. Well, nature got it right in the first place.
Yeah.
And so we can just go back to biomimicry. Let's study what nature does well. And you go into the natural ecosystems in Florida. Thank goodness there's still many of them, and they're preserved in many cases. But you can go see scrub oak habitat. You can go see a pine flatwood habitat. You can go see all these coastal ecosystems. And look at what's growing there and the communities that are growing there.
That's right.
And then we can be thoughtful about utilizing those plants, mimicking nature as best as we can while meeting the goals that are our stakeholders have, the builders, the residents, to give them what they want. They want it to look good. They want it to be colorful. They want it to be tidy. No problem. We could do all of that, but it takes design, and I think that's one of the things you've interacted a lot with the residents, because they've been reaching out to Cherrylake and asking us to provide design consultations, and I guess you've done over 100 consultations.
I mean, well, there's a lot of desire for it because it's new, and I think certainly in Westland, but if not in Central Florida in general, we're definitely a leader in that space. And they want solutions, and the more that we're delivering the solutions, the more they want them, because, a lot of what happened early on was not maybe particularly excellent landscaping, which is understandable. People were trying to figure things out. We weren't letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. But we figured out better stuff. We figured out better looking stuff. We figured out stuff that performs more, that performs better in basically every way. It's healthier. One of the interesting challenges in Westland, and I think this is something that we're probably going to continue to run across, is a lot of our most charismatic species are upland species. They're pine flatwood species or scrub species, but they're dry. And a lot of the neighborhoods that we build are not nearly as well drained as a sandhill is going to be, because a sandhill is just literally sand and sand and sand and sand. So you'll get soils that hold quite a bit more water because there's a higher clay content. So one of the challenges has been finding these drought-tolerant species that can handle reduced irrigation, but then also can handle higher levels of soil moisture because of the clay in the degraded, urban soils. Really kind of fascinating, because a lot of the stuff that we're doing down there is not supposed to work in like clay heavy garden soils. It's supposed to be in like scrub, and it does great. So seeing the I believe that's called being facultative, right? I think is the botany term. Facultative species can move between wet environments and upland environments.
Okay, I didn't know that had a name. Facultative. Well, that makes sense. Like a bald cypress.
Yes, or a maple. Yeah, or I think the antonym is obligate, or like so something that's purely aquatic, like a duck potato is obligate to the water. But these other things can kind of move around. I've been fascinated to see just how resilient these things are. Particularly, what's really also interesting is our greenhouse is doing a great job growing out a bunch of stuff that historically you just simply couldn't get anywhere. But what I've always seen with all native plants is your first generation does pretty good. This first generation of seed that you get off that mother plant, so basically your second generation of plants in the landscape, the difference in adaptation between the first generation and the second generation is insane. Like if you have, like tropical salvia is really, really good to observe this. Your first generation often struggles a little bit. The first time you start to get seedlings, they're like bulletproof, they're perfect, they like grow to exactly the height that you want them, they adapt to moisture conditions. I don't think that you'd get that kind of performance out of any plant that exists in the nursery trade at scale the way that you get them out of native plants, because they're wild enough that they're actively trying to climatize in a way that things that have been, tissue cultured for 30, 40 years just don't do.
They're static. So you're saying that these plants are still very much likely to adapt and to adjust to conditions. What was the term? Facultative?
Facultative, yeah.
Facultative. That's exactly what we're looking for. Out of the 3,000 native plants, I'm looking for 99 natives that can
move around.
That can move around. They're going to deal with slightly different levels of pH, slightly different hydrology and drainage conditions, because when you go to a builder, who's building homes all over Central Florida, they kind of want to get into a palette that is predictable, reliable, that they can use across 7 or 8 different counties. So that's where just taking the time to test out these plants. We did the research plots. We've done a lot of trialing here in our living laboratories, and figure out which ones are giving you color, which ones are facultative. So I'm starting to weave it in.
It's a good one.
Which ones are adaptable to different soil conditions? Which ones are giving you color year round? Which ones are going to be long lived in the landscape? And that's how we're starting to narrow down the list, right? From 3,000 potential selections to the right number. My number is 99 because that way.
99 is a good brand.
It's a good brand. and it's not quite 100, but who knows? Maybe we'll end up with 300 plants. There's so many good options. The Florida Green Eyes,
Yeah,
that plant is amazing.
spectacular. And then you talk about rapidly self-seeding, right? So that we have to assume that's probably going to exhibit similar characteristics. That they're going to adapt rapidly to the situations that you put them in under good management.
Yes, and it's endemic to Lake County. It's a sandhill plant. Smells like a box of chocolates.
Yes, yeah.
It's like a yellow flower with a green eye, and it throws out a carrot taproot. And so once it gets rooted in your landscape, it's holding on.
Yeah,
It's
forever.
It's there.
We think, I mean, a lot of these species are fire adapted, right? So not only are they drought tolerant, they're acclimatized, if not dependent on, periodically being on fire. You think about the stress that is for a plant to be able to survive a wildfire, and not only to survive in it, but to love it. That's the kind of resiliency that you get out of native plants that you're just not going to get out of whatever else, you know.
Right. They may be resilient where they come from, but here, they
different.
wouldn't know what to do with.
It's different
with these
environmental
conditions.
pressures. Yeah, I mean, I think probably over here you have less things that are adapted to seasonal monsoons or tsunamis or whatever, right? Like landslides. Our version of disturbance is wildfire, and that's one of the things that native plant people talk about is how to get fire into the landscape, which you can't really do. You can't really set a neighborhood on fire that's gonna get
Come
some
on,
people's
Greg.
standard up. I mean, we can try. I think we're going to get a lot of, based on the amount of pushback that I get from planting flowers, I think we're probably going to get pushback from setting fire to people's yards.
So what do? You mow?
You mow, yeah.
Prune?
And there's some pretty compelling research. I don't want to name specifically what university that it came from because I can't exactly remember, but there have been Florida-based universities that did some really compelling research on the degree to which that mowing replicates essentially the same function. You were talking about cutting down the grasses earlier, like your muley grass or whatever. If you do a cutback in the spring, it blooms amazingly in the fall. And I think probably there in a conservation context, fire probably does things that mowing doesn't do in a conservation context, but we're not in a conservation context.
We just need to allow these plants to regenerate. But we're not talking about mowing 42 times a year like we mow our lawns. We're talking about mowing once. Yeah, once a year. And then what we can do with that is take all of the green waste or the clippings essentially of the plant and put it back into the soil.
Yep, regeneration, yep.
And between the pine straw breaking down and feeding the soil, and then clipping the muley grass, putting it down as mulch, chop and drop tactics to put grass back into the ground, you are building your organic layer in the soil every year. On top of the half a cubic yard per 1,000 square feet of compost that you might use as your plant health program in lieu of fertilizers. That contributes to the soil every year. And you're slowly building and cycling nutrients and organic matter into the soil, and that compounds. And eventually you won't have to put half a yard per 1,000 square feet because you're going to be in a position where you got 2.5% organic matter in the soil, and now maybe once every other year or a quarter. We don't know yet.
Spot treating, who knows? Yeah, that's one of the things I'm the most excited to see is under management at the HOA level, at the neighborhood level or the development level. If you're doing that, those regenerative practices with your soils, how quickly do you get like really impressive results? Because no one's ever done that.
When do you get the earthworms?
Yeah, when do you start to see fluffy loam for free? And I bet faster than we think. I mean, I don't think we're talking about decades because it doesn't take much, particularly in Central Florida.
Hey, if you put out the right plants and enough compost and you get the design right, you get the different layers as you were talking about. You have to have the tree layer, and you got to get the leaves to fall. You want to have that mid-story woody layer, your Yopon Simpson stoppers, Walters viburnums, super important for the birds too to have those layers. Then you got your grasses, you got your wildflowers. All of those things are contributing in different ways to the soil formation. Starting with the root profile, the root depth. So you have different plants that provide different biomes and around the root systems. They each bring their own microbes to the table, right? Because there's like these associations at the microbial level that are important. Different seeds and different plants bring different microbes. But anyway, so if you get all of those elements right, you are creating a virtuous cycle of soil formation. And whether it takes 3 to 5 years or 5 to 10 years to get to the earthworms remains to be seen, but I think we're going to get there. And once you have that kind of healthy living soil, your costs go down even further. So what we know today is that we have a fairly low maintenance landscape that uses 0 fertilizers, 0 insecticides, 0 fungicides, 75% less water. In 3 to 5 years or 5 to 10 years, those numbers will be even better. You'll use even less water because healthy soil, it holds water. So a little bit water goes a much longer way. And I think you'll use, I'm excited to look at it over time.
It's the future is bright, I think. And it's again, like, you know, we don't have anything to point to like this. And that's been the biggest challenge, I think, for a long time, is that you just can't point to stuff and say, look, see, this is working. And now, like, looking at the data that you've got now and being able to show those tipping points, that I just really think when people find out about what's going on, it eliminates so much of that skepticism.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the pesticides, because I was trying to figure out a way to help people visualize what we're avoiding in the landscape. So as I mentioned, the names of the pesticides are like hard to pronounce.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of them, but we've eliminated them entirely, at least for insecticides and fungicides. A conventional yard is still using 7 ounces a year of insecticides and 10 ounces a year of fungicides, which we've completely eliminated.
Yeah.
Well, what is that at the scale of the 29,000 units of Sunbridge annually? It's 190,000 ounces of insecticide and 300,000 ounces of fungicides. Okay. I mean, what's an ounce? I'm not really good at visualizing those volumes. It's 58 bathtubs full.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
That's like, think of a pesticide, like the kind of thing that, you know, it says, you know, it has a warning label to contact the
corrosive and everything else.
58 bathtubs full. Like, that stuff they're neurotoxins, they're carcinogens. They contribute to cancers and to neurological diseases and to all kinds of, you know, health outcomes that we don't even know.
No, we have no idea. We have no idea. Let alone, I mean, you and Dr. Bolin talk about the neonics and everything, the catastrophic effect on ecosystems, on food webs, because of the infiltration of these chemicals into the food web. It's catastrophic.
Yeah, okay, I get it. It's like the killing the bees, but I'm talking about the people.
The people, sure, yeah.
I'm talking about like your niece and your nephew and your daughter and your dog.
Yeah.
That are out there, you know, licking the grass, you know, rolling around, playing with the soccer ball. Or
Well, so one of my big frustrations, this is literally just me whining as a landscape designer, but for years I would do these designs and I'd have almost no lawn in it, because that was my whole thing, is getting rid of lawns. People would go, I don't know if we can give up that much lawn. What are you doing in these? What is this mythical lawn activity that I never would see?
Can I have a garden party?
Yeah.
11 on 11
your
soccer.
croquet tournament, right? Like, no, man. Like, and that's not to say, obviously there's some people that use, I can hear people like, I'm in my lawn every. Sure, I don't doubt that. But then if that's the case, right, if the whole purpose of these lawns is recreational space, how much crazier is it to cover those things in poison? If that's the only part of your landscape that you even anticipate interacting with, and it's also the part of your landscape that you're covering in poison, that feels like a pretty wild contradiction in goals.
People just don't know. They don't realize the amount of toxins and poisons that are being put out on their lawns. I think if they knew and they stopped to think about it, they probably would reason like you and I. But interestingly, I've actually known a lot of people who enjoy mowing. Like, it's kind of like a pastime. Like, so what do you do in your yard? Oh, I mow it.
Wild. I mean, there's got to be a better, get like Japanese Zen gardens or something. There's got to be something better than mowing, man. Holy smokes.
I like pruning. I think weeding, to me, I actually like weeding. It's very
I like weeding in a pinch.
Yeah.
You see what I did there?
In a pinch. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, if you can't hire a good landscaper, you might have to do a little weeding yourself, because at the end of the day, that is the type of management that these landscapes require, certainly
Yeah.
in the first few years. You got to manage the weeds.
Well, we didn't even, I mean, all the reduction in pesticides and everything else, we haven't even talked about gasoline or carbon from two-stroke equipment, right? And when you're eliminating that at scale, I mean, that's a huge savings. The lawnmower, I think there's some kind of terrifying
1
statistic.
hour of
Yeah.
riding a lawnmower is equivalent to 100 miles of driving a car.
Yeah, crazy.
And CO2 emissions.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And the noise.
The noise, yeah. The storage, there's also like the huge waste of everybody having a lawnmower. Like, my God, like, do we really all have to have a full landscape company's worth of equipment to maintain these things? And, you know, we're using some of these tools to maintain the landscapes in the HOA. But to your point, like, okay, so we just did our big cut back on the grass, right? So that's a hedge trimmer for like the year. We're done.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I have had to work with the guys to get them to not immediately pick up a hedge trimmer every time that they see like a leaf out of place on a hedge line or whatever. But the reality is really, it's more efficient to use hand tools on a lot of that stuff. Because if you go through and like do a hard shear on the native plants, like there's debate about whether or not that's even good as a horticultural practice, and I would tend to agree that it's probably not. But even just aesthetically, if you were going to do a hard shear, you have all this leaf drop, you have all this debris, it gets all up in the thing, you got to go back and blow it out, you got to shake the bush, you got to go back and trim it again because now you've like, you know, teased out the little pieces that you missed or whatever.
Let it grow.
Don't do any of that. Well, but let it grow, absolutely, because I've never seen well, that's not true. I have seen some really nicely maintained formal hedges, but generally speaking, I've never seen a formally maintained hedge that I like nearly as much as a nice natural mixed hedge. But even if you've got that one weird water sprout, just snip it off, grab it in your hand, you're done.
There is a lot of over pruning that happens in landscapes. There's overwatering. But the over pruning thing, because we tend to plant things very close to get that instant impact.
Yeah.
And then the landscape company has to go in there and prune these viburnum hedges 6 or 8 times a year. Podocarpus hedges, same thing. The loropetalums around the foundation, the ligustrums. These are plants that want to be 12 feet tall that we're trying to control at a 3.5 foot height. And so that's constant pruning. So imagine what that does to the plant. Like you're creating a wound.
Yeah. Over and over.
Over and over. It's
Yeah.
like a scab that never heals.
Yeah.
And so then you get fungus and you get disease vectors, and then the plants, and so then you have to put more chemicals on them because they're sick, and then they die and you have to replace them. And this is the dirty little secret of conventional landscapes, is like they look great when they go in, but
Yeah.
you are passing on this like boatload of cost and management to the HOA or the homeowner, and they have no choice but to live with it.
Yep.
It's great for landscape companies to sell their services because it's like, well, you know, Miss Jones, I got to come in here and I'm going to have to mow your grass 42 times a year. I'm going to have to prune your hedge 6 to 8 times a year. Oh, and I'm going to have to replace 30% of your plants every 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to pay for all that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to hire this other company who's going to come in with this truck
Yeah.
full of chemicals, and they're just going to squirt it all over the place and put a little
Indiscriminately.
yard sign that says, beware.
Best of luck, buddy. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't let your dog lick this landscape for 2 weeks. So that's what we're doing, but it's really a do nothing landscape in the end if you get past establishment and design it properly. I mean, not exactly do nothing. There's a few things that we'll do, but very little.
I say the way that I've tried to, because for a long time, and I'm guilty of this, saying, you know, maintenance or it's no maintenance landscaping. That's not true. I say it's different maintenance, and it's a lot better maintenance. It's not hopping on a lawnmower. Well, I mean, okay, if you like mowing, then that's on a selling point, but it's not running a bunch of two-stroke equipment and blowers and doing all this kind of sort of miserable, repetitive stuff. It's to your point, it's weeding, which can be quite therapeutic. It's really strategic pruning, which requires skill, and I mean, if you really apply yourself to it, it's quite artful. I mean, really good pruning really does take some thought and some attention. And like, if people are looking for serenity in the garden, which I think is what people are looking for when they're mowing, like you're kind of alone, you know, you're like on your chariot doing your thing, like I think you get that 1,000 times more from really pruning a shrub correctly than you do from mowing. And that could just be me, but yeah, it's different maintenance, but it's way better maintenance. It's way less grueling. It's way less physically taxing for the most part. And I think the degree to which there's maintenance, it's a paradigm a whole lot rather participate in than the traditional just mow, blow, and go thing. Good Lord.
So how many guys do we have on the crews that are maintaining these landscapes at Sunbridge right now?
I guess in the whole, well, on the maintenance crew, I think we've got, so the detail crew, so we have two crews. We have a mow crew, we have a detail crew. The mow crew is handling predominantly common areas and is, as their name suggests, mowing. The detail crew is doing the stuff that we've just been talking about, the kind of groovier stuff, and that's 3 guys.
3 guys. So what has their experience been? Do they like this new kind of work? Because they came off of...
We get yes and no. I think that some guys have, they just, they're there to do the job and they don't really care and they just kind of want to do what they're used to. And I get that, right? I mean, that's kind of, that's going to exist in any industry. And then other people, I think, are more motivated to see that, first of all, there's a lot of opportunity because this is specializing in a way that most people in an industry that historically really doesn't even offer specialization as a path. I mean, you could work in a crew for 30 years and just basically doing the same stuff that everybody else is doing on day one. There's really not a lot of beyond management, there's not a lot of specialization. With this, you have the ability to be a guy who's really good at pruning, a guy who is really observant about, potential issues. Weeding maybe is not quite so fun or whatever, but it's still like, it's the ability to read a landscape, which is what I really try to explain to these guys is, look, it's not quite as simple as jumping off the truck and grabbing stuff and just kind of like hammer look for nail. You know what I mean? You have to really engage with what's happening here and understand the outcome that we're looking for, which is things being pretty, sort of, at the most superficial level. And that's kind of subjective. So you get into some challenges where, well, I like really tightly maintained hedges. Okay, well, that's not really the deal in this neighborhood. But either way, I think that the people who see the opportunity see that this is an opportunity for advancement, for specialization, and for a better quality of life than you're going to get doing traditional landscape maintenance. I mean, barring, maybe working at like the Savannah golf courses or something, right? Where you're doing really high-end stuff. This detailing is an ability to be a horticulturalist, to be a gardener, not a landscaper. And I think that being a gardener is something that's intrinsic to almost everyone, I think. I think it's just kind of in our DNA to be gardeners. And when the guys connect to that, they really connect to it. And I don't think you ever see people really connect to the rest of landscape maintenance. I think it's just a job. This is a career.
Yeah, it's different than walking a string trimmer up and down the sidewalk all day.
Yeah, which and that's not to diminish people's skill. There are people that can edge, a whole run of 50-foot sidewalk in a perfectly straight line, in 20 seconds. And that absolutely takes skill and it absolutely takes discipline and it's absolutely commendable. And people that can run hedge trimmers and keep things formally sheared, absolutely a skill, absolutely commendable. But once you've mastered it, you've mastered it. And I think that there's nothing wrong if that's what you want to do. But this, I think, is far more intellectually engaging and a whole lot more fascinating and to your point, has more possibility for things we don't even know about yet. I mean, this is the very beginning of how this is all going to go.
There's a lot of observation that goes into managing these landscapes. You have to be very present and aware of the plants and observe how they're expressing themselves throughout the year.
Yeah.
You have to be able to identify the seedling emergence of the wildflowers. So when you're weeding, you leave the good stuff.
It's a big one.
Dialing back to water, paying attention to these beneficial relationships, for the pest management, all of that. It's a lot of just paying attention and observing. Mm-hmm. And I do agree it's a higher value skill. I was kind of surprised though that you say we only have 3 people doing detail work. How many homes are we maintaining?
We have 30 residential homes. 33 residential homes. We just got 3 more on Friday. We have about 30 that we're doing for the that are specs, that are houses that have been built that have not been sold.
Yeah.
And then we have the model homes that we maintain.
So it's another 10 or so.
Yep. And then we have the townhomes that we maintain.
Okay, so you've got like 70 homes plus a bunch of townhomes, and you do that with 3 people?
Yeah, across a week, 40 hours.
I was expecting we would have like a dozen people out there by this time, but I guess it's...
If you count the Mo Crew, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll say this. I think we're rapidly going to need to expand because now that we're particularly coming back into the growing season, people are knocking on the door. And that's also not including things like additional enhancements, the construction of the new houses that we're doing, the construction.
Sure. But just the maintenance of all that landscape is great. And when you talk about the mow crew, a lot of that is to mow the parkway, which we were talking about. Tavistock is already committed to doing perennial peanut and mimosa.
Yeah, it's gone.
And the future neighborhoods, so that's gone.
Yeah.
Which is going to radically reduce the man count. And I think that's one of the great opportunities here is that it's ultimately, I think it is a better landscape ecologically. We can make it just as visually stunning with the design ideas and using the plants that we talked about. But the big reward is our costs are going to go down, and already I think it's competitive. It's no more expensive than maintaining a conventional landscape. That I can confirm.
Yeah, it's definitely not more expensive.
But over time, I think those costs will keep going down. So whereas like conventional landscape is like buying a car. As soon as you drive it off the lot, it starts to depreciate.
And it never, there is no other possibility. Yeah.
Your costs are going to keep going up. Your repair and maintenance costs, as that car ages, the costs go up.
Yeah.
But sustainable landscape is more like a home.
Yeah.
It appreciates over time.
Yeah.
And if you move in and you decorate it and you create memories there and you kind of imprint your life into that space, it grows in value over time. It becomes more beautiful, more meaningful. And that's really what we're seeing is these landscapes ecologically they improve over time, the soils improve over time, the costs decrease over time. So your home values are appreciating over time as that landscape is delivering greater and greater value. But the opposite is true of these conventional landscapes because of the way that they basically peak within a few months of being planted, and then it's just one long decline in terms of the plant material health is going to decline. You're rapidly going to get to the point where you need to replace a lot of plant material, and your costs are never going to decrease. If anything, your maintenance costs are increasing.
Well, because you're trying to, I guess this is still true with native landscaping a little bit, but you're also trying to kind of stall ecology at a moment in time, right? So if you have all these things like viburnums and loropetalums that are small trees, right? You're trying to freeze these things at a certain age and like hold them there and prevent the flow of time from happening. Like if you think about that on a metaphorical level, like the hubris of trying to stop time to have this one snapshot of a moment where the garden looks really nice is a really wild undertaking. And the longer that time goes on, the harder you're going to have to try to do that. Because those things want to grow. They want to be wild because wherever they were from, they were wild there. And because the native landscape, I think, has that sort of built-in seasonality and some built-in succession to it, it's way less energy to try to arrest it at this particular moment in these plants' development. They kind of can come and go and senesce and regenerate in a way that you're just not going to be able to do with a formal landscape. You can't do it.
No, it's a real shift in mindset from kind of that predict and control mechanistic view of the world where everything can be dominated by humans and we can bend it to our will and we can deploy the chemical industrial machinery and all of these tools to get the landscape to be static. Yeah. Evergreen. Yeah. It's a postcard, snap, never changes.
And then complain that there's no seasons in Florida.
Whereas the other approach is like a whole systems view. It's really allowing nature to be alive and to be as amazingly complex and beautiful as nature is. And we have to be stewards. We can only kind of guide it, gently, but it's just a big, massive mindset shift, and we can talk about it, you and I, because we drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
But you've been interacting with all of the residents who are moving in. When they bought their homes in
Yeah.
Sunbridge, they probably weren't thinking about the landscape very much at the time they made their purchase decision.
I think it's a safe assessment based on many of those interactions. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, you're buying a home, it's a big investment. You know, you're probably looking at the kitchen, the countertops, the bedrooms, the bathrooms, your mortgage, and your move-in, and all of this. And
Yeah, it's a bit.
you know,
It's a
all
lot,
of a sudden,
yeah.
you're like, wait a second,
What's going on out here?
what is this?
This is craziness. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm empathetic about that. I mean, I get that it's like one more thing, right? It's already stressful to move. It's already, an incredibly complex thing to move into a landscape. The thing is, again, like, I think we're focused on the challenges because that's where we see the opportunities. But what often happens, because we're in like problem solving mode from a professional perspective, is we're glossing over the fact that a lot of these interactions are extremely positive and people are stoked about it. I mean,
Wait, the residents are stoked about it?
many of them are. Many of them are. A lot of them are very vocally not stoked about it.
Okay, so you have both camps.
But we definitely have both camps. I mean, I've had really cool conversations with people who are fully bought in. And if anything, the people who are fully bought in that are still maybe a little grumbly want more than they got at move-in, which is standard. I mean, the new construction is typically not opulently landscaped, right? So there's often a lot of room for improvement, which is fine because we can do that really, really efficiently. Using things like those native perennials, deploying like a tree just to kind of anchor and bring in a focal point and stuff. But I think probably in the 100-something consultations that I've done, I've maybe only had, truthfully, I'd say less than a half a dozen people that were like, I think this is dumb, I don't get it, I don't care. Like, you know what I mean? Most of the people are like, I get it, I'm on board, I would like it to look a little bit nicer.
So you're saying about 90% of the residents that you've interacted with are generally receptive and favorable towards this landscape.
I think so, yeah. Like in your classic whatever the thing where it's I strongly disagree to strongly agree, right? I think we've got a lot of people that are in the positive quartile, but maybe not all the way at the end of the positive spectrum.
But you have some of those?
A couple, yeah.
Strong, passionate advocates. So are you able to inspire them and to educate them in ways where you're seeing people starting to convert or becoming more receptive to the landscapes?
I'd like to think so. I mean, what we're seeing is an improvement in the landscaping. So if our KPI is adoption of the plant palette and improvement of the streetscape, like if that's what we're using as our metric, that's happening. And so, I don't know that I have data that I can point to and go, that's because I've had these conversations with people. But I have had a bunch of conversations with people. They have improved their landscapes, and a bunch of their neighbors did too. So I'm going to take credit for it. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I think I think we are adjusting it. I think when people start to see examples of designs that work, it's kind of hilariously simple. They go, well, I'll just do that too.
Yeah.
And it's really that simple. I think is that we've got enough examples in the neighborhood of good stuff. Really, and truthfully, the main thing is probably the alternative turfs are the most adventurous thing that's happening out there. They were the thing that was probably the least visible in the earlier phases of the neighborhood. They're the things that are now quite mature, where we've used these alternative turfs, and people are going, well, that's great, I love that, that's too easy.
So sunshine mimosa, perennial peanut.
Sunshine mimosa overwhelmingly. We are cautious about perennial peanut on the house side of the sidewalk because it often has a tendency to get quite aggressive. So if it's not under active maintenance, it's a little scary to say like, yeah, just go nuts, because it can kind of get up onto your other stuff and you got to take care of it a little bit. Whereas mimosa is a little bit better behaved. I've found. I mean, there's
so you put the perennial
debate on
peanut
that
in the parkway where it's got the
Confined,
curbs. Yeah, it's got sidewalk and curb, and then the mimosa on the yards where. And that's a pretty pattern because it gives you purple on the front garden, and it gives you yellow on the parkway and the sidewalk in the middle, and you're walking down the neighborhood, and what used to be turf is now blooming.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So people are responding to that as they're seeing more examples of these alternative turfs.
Yeah, I think that's a hard pill to swallow, which again is no great surprise because it's not anything anybody would have ever seen before. And short of having things that you can show to people, it's really tough to say like, trust me, we're going to put hundreds of these plants in your yard. It's not really going to look like anything for like 2 or 3 weeks, but then it's going to be great. in comparison to the traditional landscape model, which is I'm going to install a fully mature landscape and that day I will hand you the, the keys, so to speak, and it'll look great, right? Like if that's what you're used to, this is a lot different value proposition. But at the same time, when you've got restrictions on the amount of turf that you can use, and you've got this land that you have to take care of, and you look at your neighbor across the street and they've got this beautiful green ground cover with those purple flowers, come on.
When they see it, they want it, and it's easier to sell. But now the builders are doing this as part of the revisions to the Sunbridge residential landscape standards. These landscapes are going to be delivered from the builder to the new homeowner.
Yeah, I think the biggest improvement that we've seen in general is in the new construction. We started implementing the inspections for the turnovers, basically. When people are the builders are completing their landscapes, we're looking at them and helping them to try to kind of wrap their heads around this, because it's difficult to find anybody that can devote the time to it. Frankly, I don't think it's a question of ability. These landscapers are established companies. They're very talented designers in a lot of cases, but this is different, and it's an obstacle that you don't always come across. So once somebody owned that process and could kind of go, hey, like I think we need to nudge this a little bit, pretty much immediately we saw improvement in what was going in. And then that's good, because now we don't have this sort of latency in between a person moving into a house and then they kind of have to like improve things, and then they, it's still not maybe great. Now they're going in pretty much perfect.
The builder landscapes have greatly improved, and I think the inspections have been helpful.
Yeah.
Which is another interesting perspective you have, because you do the consultations with the residents.
Yeah.
You help them with enhancement designs. You manage the detail crew that's doing the maintenance of all these landscapes, and you're doing the inspections for the builder landscapes, making sure that their landscapes are conforming with the standards. And as you say, hopefully it's, we give them a guidance if something doesn't meet standard. We give them a solution for how they can get back into compliance, and that's a coaching, training process.
Nobody likes an inspector, right? Like just in general, it's just not really ever what people are excited to see. So when I first got out there, I think people were definitely like, who's this guy and what is this? And I really tried to spend time and go, look, I understand why you would be skeptical, but I promise you I'm here to help. And eventually I got these guys to soften up a little bit, and they go, can you come look at this? And we'd walk over to the property and they go like, what's going on? And I'm like, well, okay. That species isn't allowed, literally just this one. If you take this one plant out, you're good. Like, that's it? Like, yeah, that's it. And we started working with these guys. We walked through, and I'd say, hey, come over and look at this guy's house. Like, this is killer. This is really, really good. Like, you guys nailed it right here. And then the next one, just do what you did, right? Like, oh, okay. And I mark my victories by these okay moments that I have with the residents and with the builders, where I go, look, this is really, like, we can do this. All you gotta do is this little tweak, and they go, oh, okay. I'm like, okay, all right, I got one. Like,
not so hard as we thought it was.
Yeah.
It's working. The landscapes are getting better and better every year. The builders are getting better at delivering the landscapes. I'm so excited, especially now that we're going into neighborhood D with the new standards.
I think the new neighborhood's going to be killer. I mean, we've started doing some inspections. They look really good. They look cohesive in a way that I don't think, like, we're really now like that delivery of, this is the split oak forest plant palette, like this is what would be here, so to speak. This is like how this neighborhood's supposed to look. We're turning that out now, and I'm really, really impressed by the stuff that I'm seeing. I think it's going to be gorgeous. I really do. I have this vision in my mind, and this isn't exactly the Sunbridge plant palette, but I've thought about it for years. If you walk through a pine flatwoods or a scrub hammock in, like, those first couple of years after it burns, and you've got like that perfectly even layer of saw palmetto, and then you've got like these wide spaced columnar longleaf pines, and you've got these little wildflowers that are everywhere. I used to take people, like design clients, I'd take them up to the Wakaiva, like wilderness area, and I go, okay, just imagine a house in that. That's it. Just imagine a house in that. And then it looks like that. Like, oh, like that's it. Like that's what we're talking about. Like, these are beautiful spaces. All we have to do is just figure out a way to put houses into these beautiful landscapes that exist for free. You know what I mean? We've got the oak hammock, and it's spectacular. We've got the pine flatwoods, and it's spectacular. If you just take those plants and put them in the neighborhood, you're done. That's all you got to do.
Florida is amazing. Why would we want to try to make it look different than what it already is? You know, the land of flowers, one of the most diverse ecosystems on the planet.
Yeah.
And you're right, you know, and there's this thing about people are willing to plan a year or 2 years in advance, spend a good amount of money to pack their family into a car, an RV, or fly across the country and schedule a 2-3 week visit to the national parks. Like, we're going to Yosemite, we're going to Yellowstone. This is like a bucket list thing. You know, they're gonna talk about it for months and months, if not years afterwards. They're gonna post on Facebook. They're gonna have amazing memories. It's like real quality recreation. Like, everybody wants to go to the national park.
Yeah.
So why not just make the local community a national park? Why not make your home a national park? You know, and all it is being connected to nature, being deeply immersed in a high functioning ecosystem that's contributing in a beneficial way to wildlife and to water and natural resources, which is beautiful, which is appropriate to the place where you find it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that, just like your little thought experiment. Go into this beautiful pine flatwoods and now close your eyes and imagine a house right here. Wouldn't that be a lovely landscape? Yes, it would.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to do. I mean, it certainly is hard to shift an entire paradigm and to move the industry towards capabilities of executing at scale. And yes, that's a little bit difficult to do, but fundamentally, to build a landscape like this is just about using the native plants that we know work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're here, taking care of your soils, you know, being thoughtful about the design, getting all the different layers of the landscape right. Not hard to do.
Not nearly as hard as I think people maybe even want it to be. You know what I mean? I think there's that same inertia that people have against change. I think often there's a like we use that term blue ocean, right? Where people have this like sort of fear of what they don't know, which is understandable, but it really isn't. Yeah, it's not like this is like we put a guy on the moon in the 60s. That's a whole lot harder than this is. You know what I mean? This is just kind of using different plants and getting people enthusiastic about them. And I think in terms of the challenges that the human species has overcome, I think we got this one.
This is low-hanging fruit. Well, and you know, it's not exactly easy to take care of a conventional Florida landscape.
No.
A lot of science and research and technology and skill goes into that. It's just, we've been at it for 50 years. The land-grant universities, you know, have been doing the research. You know, you've got thousands of EDIS documents on, you know, how to manage chinch bugs and, you know, how to apply imidacloprid and like how much NPK to use for Bahia, St. Augustine, trees and shrubs. So, and we've got a whole industry in Florida that has been trained and educated and shaped to execute what is actually a very difficult thing to do, which is to manage these exotic plants in St. Augustine turf systems. It's probably more complicated.
We're terraforming a landmass, like, and we don't even mean to.
Yeah, it's actually more complicated, I think, in the end. It's just we take for granted that it's easy because we have so much research and training and industry experience in doing it that way.
But that's back to my permaculture roots, right? The problem is the solution. So if we can do that, to your point, and that's that hard, then it should be trivially easy to implement easier processes, easier supported by data that we have less inputs, you know, plant species that we know are adapted to the landscape, that also require less intensive management. Like, boy, I mean, if we can do all this other stuff, this cannot be an insurmountable challenge. I don't believe that it is.
Oh, it's not. That's why it's happening inevitably, and then we have the reward of less water, elimination of fertilizers, elimination of insecticides, eliminations of fungicides, you know, reduction in herbicides, the ecosystem services, you know, the pollinators, the butterflies, the soil health, the water quality, all of these things, which at the scale of an individual lot, yeah, it doesn't sound like much, but like we were talking about, if you scale it out,
Oh my God.
it's huge. And so it doesn't cost more. It's not more complicated to do. Looks great, smells great, feels great. Literally.
You can swim in it. You can.
Yeah, well, you can eat your landscape and not get sick, but it smells good. It doesn't. You don't have the blaring sound of the two-stroke cycle equipment.
Yeah.
There's all these reasons to do it, and it's just a matter of getting through the initial resistance and having the opportunity to demonstrate at scale that it's possible to collect the data, to show people, to build the pro formas, all of these things that are being enabled by the simple fact that we have the ability to do this at Sunbridge with Tavistock. They've committed to being, the leader in implementing this.
Yeah.
It's a huge opportunity.
It's enormous. It's enormous. And it's something that we used to talk about. Like everybody would be like, man, if we could just get a neighborhood, And like now it's here. Like, let's do it.
And you're the guy on the ground who's like making, connecting all of these components from the builders to the landscape crews to the residents, the designs, the inspections, the consultations. I mean, I'm really glad that you chose to come on board and work with us to do this.
I am truly honored and thrilled to be here. I mean, when we had talked initially and you were like, hey, what do you think about coming to Cherrylake? I was like, that's the thing that I said that I wanted, right? So why would I not? And I mean, it was truly, it's really crazy to think about being in the audience at Outside like 3 years ago and thinking like, man, like that's a cool project. And now like being really enmeshed in that same project is really cool. I mean, I truly am deeply appreciative that I get the opportunity to guide that and to shape that landscape because I don't know how else I would have ever gotten there. And I can't imagine a more rewarding project to be working on.
Well, we can't do it without people like you and people like Jimmy and Colton and Cody and the whole collab really, which
we've got a killer. I mean, that's what I'm on camera, right? But we've got a killer team. Like Cody is a monster. Cody can build a landscape about as fast as anybody I've ever seen in my life. Colton has an encyclopedic knowledge of these plants. Jimmy is Jimmy. I mean, Jimmy contains multitudes. Like he knows everything, right? So, it's a killer team, and I think we're really hitting a stride where we're starting to make stuff happen that I think. I mean, I know because I had conversations with people before I was here that were like, "This is never going to work. This is never going. They'll never be able to figure it out. They'll never figure this out." It's like, I don't know, dude. I wouldn't bet against it. I'm hearing some pretty cool stuff, and now to be here, it's like, yeah, we're figuring it out.
Well, for me, there was a time when I wasn't sure if we could figure this out. I was like, but we'll go ahead and pretend like we know what we're doing because it's so important to try. And I was fairly confident that with consistent persistence, you will figure it out. What you don't know, you'll learn. And so, but anyways, it was a little risky 3-4 years ago not having the experience.
Yeah.
But today we're past that, and I feel much more confident knowing that the hard stuff and the unknown stuff, like we've seen enough to know that we can do this. Like there's nothing that's working on me where I'm like, oh my gosh, this isn't going to work if we can't get this figured out.
Yeah.
Like I feel like we figured most of what we need to ensure success. Now, are we going to get better? Yes. We're going to keep learning, of course. But we've passed that highly risky stage where, there were a lot of unknowns and things that had yet to be confirmed. Like we've confirmed the water savings, the fertilizers, the pesticides. We confirmed the cost.
You can grow the plants.
We can grow the plants. We can scale up the inventory at the nursery. We can train the crews. Like we've confirmed like a lot of these things in the past 5 years. And next week we have the OUTSIDE Collab. We're going to have over 180 people attending, visiting these landscapes here at Cherrylake. Great speakers and panels. Yeah. And what inspires me is that all of this cool stuff that's happening at Sunbridge and within Cherrylake is really happening and starting to happen in a lot of other places, a lot of other really incredible communities of people, whether it's the landscape architects and planners at Dix Hyde or at Kimley Horn or some of the stuff that's going on at UF or UCF. But there's like 5 or 6 other really large community developments who are seeing what's happening at Sunbridge and getting ready to do the same.
Yeah.
And over the next, probably in the next and if we sit down in 3 years, we'll be talking about 10 communities or more that are doing this at scale.
Yeah.
That's when you're starting to say, okay, this isn't an experiment. This is an industry. This is a new standard.
Yeah. That's right.
And we're almost there.
And I mean, I do a lot of beating up on conventional landscaping. That's really how I made my career, was being pretty vocally outspoken about my thoughts about a lot of this stuff. But like, I also think the pie is big enough, man. Like, I don't know that it's an all or nothing.
Sure.
Not for a long time. Like, I think people get really threatened, and it's like, no, like, there is more than enough for everybody in this.
Oh, come on, join the party.
Yeah.
Let's get going. We need 10 more large-scale landscape companies to dedicate, to doing sustainable landscape services.
An iota. Like, think about the pie slice of, it's like, yeah, like, put a team out there, see how it goes, man.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
The landscape industry in Florida is huge. They do an economic impact study. I can't remember what it is. It's like $2.5 billion, maybe more. It's a massive industry.
Massive. I mean, Connected Landscapes, I was at peak was a 10-person company, and I was almost our entire administrative staff. I mean, I had like an office person that I had part-time, and we got to $500,000 just by raising our hand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's the opportunity is
opportunities are there.
Absolutely there. Like, if you put up a flag and you're even halfway competent, you're going to get quite a lot of attraction very quickly.
So let's say it's a $2.5 billion landscape industry in Florida, and this style of landscaping carves out a little niche over the next 10 years to be 10%.
Yeah.
That's a $250 million industry.
It's not bad.
There could be dozens, if not more, companies at different scales. They could be small startups, like you had started with Connected Landscapes. It could be Cherrylake, but hey, why doesn't Brightview? Come on.
Yeah, the big guys. Yeah.
Yellowstone, Juniper.
Green Star.
And I think they're probably starting to pay attention, I would guess.
There's some feelers. I've talked to a few people that are like, yeah, we're kind of looking into what all this is about. I'm like, good, man, good. Do it. Like,
the more the merrier.
Yeah. The only thing that can happen, I mean, I think that Outside Collab is valuable because it brings that spirit of collaboration. But really, the only thing that can happen is it's the tide that raises all the ships. The more of this that happens, the more visible it becomes, the more obvious it is that it's a better paradigm, the more the people that want it, the more that we drive demand, the more that we have supply. I don't see a way, and this is a lot of the conversations that you and I have talked about, how there is a tendency for, when you align with ecologically dynamic principles, that you get these kinds of swirling knock-on effects, the fruit of Capra, and it all kinds of feeds itself. And I think that it's almost a certainty that the native landscaping industry will follow that exact same path, where the more people get involved, the better it gets, just because we're now working actively with the natural inertia of these biodynamic systems.
We're literally creating connected networks, living systems, whole systems, and that triggers all kinds of dynamics that inevitably lead to growth and abundance.
Yeah.
And it's exciting. I talk about it probably way more than I should, but that's the theme of this podcast, so I might as well.
We can't talk about pizza.
Pizza, well, no, let's not. I think people are interested, and it's an idea that's catching on, and it's got a lot of potential. So, what would your vision be 10 years from now? What does the Florida landscape look like? What do communities look like in 10 years?
At the risk of repetition, I mean, I have this crystal clear vision. I almost, earlier this year, I told my wife, I'm insane. Like, I think you probably also have the tendency to find a lot of hobbies and things, rabbit holes to go down. And I was like, I want to learn how to paint so that I can paint that vision of a house inside of Florida Flatwoods, because if I could show people what I'm seeing in my mind, I think you could sell it to any developer in the world and go, you telling me you don't want your neighborhood to look like that? Just a community nestled in these oak hammocks that have this lush vegetation that surrounds them, that are just that have color, just riotous amounts of color. in a mature tree canopy. We haven't talked about that. That's a kind of a weird side way. Just the tree canopy, the power of the tree canopy. When you drive through a neighborhood that has these, old growth oaks, like how that immediately creates this sense of community and this sense of beauty. If we start to account for those things now when we're developing, I think that, in 10 years, you're going to drive through these places that look spectacular because they look the way that wild spaces in Orlando look or Central Florida look. And that was my whole raison d'etre for this whole thing, was this connected landscapes, to eliminate this idea that we are somehow separate from that you have to have wild spaces over there and people over here, and people are fundamentally different than everything. No, like it's all just one thing. And I think the bridge between that and where we are is just the intention to get there. I think if we could just get over this feeling that it has to be separate, that we have to maintain control over all of this. Like, you don't. It's beautiful. Don't you want to be part of that? Don't we all drive every weekend to sit in the insane lines at all the state parks for all the springs and everything? Like, those fill up by 5:30 in the morning. People are desperate to spend time in those spaces. Just bring them home. We can do that. We can have them in our backyard. It can all be the same thing, and it can be absolutely spectacular and beautiful and ecologically dynamic.
I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah, I do too. I don't see how we couldn't be.
Well, I can't say how grateful I am that you chose to partner up with us to move this mission forwards. It's been a huge injection of talent and inspiration and leadership, and that's what we need. And I'm hopeful that we'll keep attracting people to this cause. Either, join Cherrylake, sure, or find a way to join the movement wherever you're at. Because I think now there's lots of ways that you can plug in to be a part of this. And that's exciting too, because I think there's a lot of people who are looking for a mission, looking for a purpose. We all benefit from having one. And what greater mission or purpose, than bringing nature home.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for just being as passionate as you are.
Yeah. I can't help it. For better or worse. It gets me in trouble, I think, as often as it gets me anything worth having. But it's I can't imagine anything else, man. This is the ride, This is the ride that I'm on, and it's a great ride to be on. I get to work with cool people. I get to do good stuff. Like, that's the thing that I tell the guys. Like, at the end of the day, man, like, our job is to make things prettier. That's pretty good. You know what I mean? How many people really get to say that your job is to make the world more beautiful? Some people do, but it's a good position to be in.
Yeah, amen. Well, thank you very much, Craig.
Yeah,
this
my
has
pleasure.
been fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.